As.
Such as, he claims that he received a letter from an informant on January the 5th, 1983. That's incorrect. We have transcripts of an interview that Mr. Burke places himself in with police, interviewing this suspect shortly after he had been convicted of his second murder. And Burke goes all through his book claiming that this man has made these statements to him. They're completely refuted in the documents that we have.
Wait, what documents are they?
I have a transcript, number one, of the interview that was conducted with the informant on January 14th, 1983, at which time Sergeant Carmen Tamaro indicated that they do not have the letter. They were anticipating it, and they were making arrangements to try and get the letter.
So how critical is this letter that you're talking about to your former sister-in-law's case?
It describes, through the informant, claiming it was a confession from Mr. Paradiso of having committed the crime. And I do have a copy of the letter as well that is clearly false.
Yeah, but Paradiso was never charged or convicted of this crime.
He was never charged with the crime, but the very concerning point to me is the fact that in a false statement from a very compromised and questionable informant in an era where those people were protected, they gave the correct manner of death with detail.
Yeah, now, when we originally talked, I think you spoke a lot about, you said that there's a lot of corruption in the police department, in the prosecutor's office, and that sort of thing. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, this was a time period when we now know the FBI was involved in protecting informants. There were two factions of organized crime. The FBI was very heavily involved in this case. They were brought in on December the 3rd, 1981, and were involved in multiple aspects. Some of the same names that appear in the Bulger operations and wrongdoing there also appear in this case.
Yeah, Tim brought that up. He says some people have claimed that Whitey Bulger had your former sister-in-law, in mob parlance, whacked, killed. Is that something that you believe?
I don't know that I believe it was Whitey Bulger in a direct sense. What I do believe is that we have two cops, the two cops that were involved in the case, who were involved in drug enforcement.
Yeah.
And there is information in the records that indicates they were collaborating.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this question. Your former sister-in-law was a Harvard graduate student, right?
That is correct.
She was a world removed from anything that had to do with any criminal activity. And I think in Tim Burke's book, it says that she was picked up by an illegal cabbie, right?
That's his claim.
Yeah.
And he makes the claim of a cab. He references several news articles, etc.
Yeah, so there would be no reason why your former sister-in-law would be involved with a mob or any bad guys or anything like that, because she wasn't even involved with that, right?
My sister-in-law probably, and I think that's something that became... people tried to find the motive and couldn't come up with one.
Right.
But I'm not so certain that there couldn't be some family reasons.
So
whether motivation perhaps was against the family as opposed to Joan herself.
So let me ask you this question. Your main gripe is that the prosecutor didn't investigate this properly, that something fishy is going on with law enforcement, and they didn't spend the right amount of effort and time to really find the true murderer of your sister-in-law, correct?
I believe that this case was fabricated from the beginning.
Well, wait a minute. Your sister-in-law is passed on. She's deceased.
Correct.
What's your idea of how she was murdered?
Her remains, and I believe we discussed this the other day, it's completely inconsistent with how Mr. Burke describes the crime. It's impossible. It's physically impossible that it happened that way. It was a very brutal murder and very intentional. Someone had to have really taken something with a great deal of leverage. She was also stripped of any clothing and found in a trash bag in a very remote area. You've got law enforcement that were putting forth false information. They continued to divert it. The explanation they came up with, the boat theory, when they had conflicting information already in their files, that this probably was not the case, they continued to maintain a theory that explained why there was no body. And again, they described the manner of death. They abandoned the manner of death that they were applying to this man and gave the correct manner of death.
Eve, let me ask you a question because, I've never been in your position where I've had a close family member die from a horrible crime. But this was about 28 years ago now. And here this book comes out recently and has to bring up a lot of old memories, dredges up a lot of old emotions. At what point in time, if ever, because I'm not judging this, I'm just asking the question, at what point in time from an aggrieved family member do you finally say it doesn't make any difference anymore, she's unfortunately passed on, and let's let it sit?
When Joan's remains were found, I had my doubts about the explanation that was given. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And there have been a lot of victims as a result of this case, a lot of victims. There are still people who have been hurt by this yet today. That's important, and the truth matters. I think Joan's loss probably has a greater impact on me now, if that's possible, than it even did at the time, because I've got a greater understanding.
Well, in a sense, and I think a lot of people would relate to this, to you, this is just like yesterday. It's not like it's 30 years ago.
I have been reliving this experience, only it's an entirely different case than what I knew it to be at the time.
Eve, let me ask you this. I'm looking at a newspaper article. I think it's from the Boston Herald. It's about a year old. And after the book came out, I'll read you a quote. "I think it will keep our daughter alive in the minds of people," said Webster's mother, Terry. "She and her husband, George, have been friends with Burke for more than 20 years. Question: why are her parents comfortable with the explanation and all the efforts that Tim Burke put forth in law enforcement, and you're not?
Anyone who knows George Webster really well knows that when he makes a decision, when he decides upon something, that's the way it is. I have indicated to them that I have been looking at this very, very closely, and they really are not supportive of him in the sense that they have not come forward and said, this is what we believe about the bond statement. There's information that I know now I have seen that they have not. I don't know of the other information I've gathered what they did or did not know at the time.
Right. Okay, in the minute that we have left, 30 seconds, what do you want to see done?
This case needs to have an independent investigation.
Okay.
The documents that have come to light need to come to the surface.
All right. Is there a way that our audience can get a hold of you?
Absolutely.
How can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me through an email address. It's my name, EVE_CARSON @yahoo.com.
All right, terrific. I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing. I also want to thank my co-host and good friend, Roger Clark, of the law firm of Clark, Goldberg, and Madruga. Roger, would you hand out your telephone number and your website?
Steve, I'll be glad to, and it's always good to be here. It's 310-478-0077, and the webpage is clarkgoldberg.com.
All right. Steve Murphy here. You can get more information about this very interesting case and the guest at www.lbishow.com. Thanks for being with us.